Jim Gordon was one of the most famous detectives in the police force. Not only was he renowned for his exceptional intelligence and crime analysis skills, but also for his courage and physical abilities. His name had become synonymous with justice. Any case that landed in his hands was eventually solved. Criminals feared his name, and his colleagues considered him a genius in the world of crime solving. However, fame always comes with enemies. The more successful Jim became, the more people wanted to defeat him, challenge him, or even destroy him. But so far, no one had succeeded. Everything changed when a mysterious figure known as the Enigma King emerged. Unlike other criminals, he didn't use violence or murder. Instead, he devised intricate puzzles and traps, turning the police into his unwitting players. The police had received multiple reports about him, but no one had ever seen his face. He only revealed his identity through cryptic messages left at crime scenes. One day, Jim received a message. It was written in beautiful handwriting on a plain white sheet of paper. The greatest detective in the world. Are you really as smart as they say? I have designed 3 stages for you. If you pass 2, you will face me in the 3rd. But if you fail, your legend will end forever. I'll be waiting. There was no sign of the sender, but Jim immediately knew this was a serious challenge. He couldn't ignore the invitation. If the Enigma King was truly who he claimed to be, this was his chance to capture one of the most elusive criminals of his time. So he accepted the challenge. But was he really ready for what awaited him? Case 1. The Murder of the Walter Family. Detective Jim Gordon entered his office and carefully examined the new case file he had received. The only name on the file was Walter. At first, Jim had never heard of this family, but his reputation as an unmatched detective weighed heavily on his shoulders. He decided to take on the case. A murder in a grand house. Jim arrived at the neighborhood where the Walter family's house stood, a large white mansion with tall windows, seemingly untouched by time. The iron gate was slightly ajar. He cautiously stepped inside. The first thing that caught his attention was the trail of bloodstains leading into different rooms. This had to be a brutal murder. As he entered the living room, he noticed something even stranger. There was no sound at all. A deathly silence filled the house. Jim moved carefully toward the back door, opened it, and stepped into the yard. The large untouched garden looked normal, but something felt off. In the corner of the yard stood a small shed. He approached it and pushed the door open. Inside, he found an old work uniform, a few mechanical tools, and a map laid out on a workbench. He examined the map closely. It was a detailed blueprint of the Walter family's mansion, marking every room, hallway, and even secret passageways. Realizing that this could be the key to solving the mystery, he carefully folded the map and slipped it into his pocket before quickly leaving the shed. Jim stepped out of the house and decided to talk to the Walter family's neighbors. He knocked on several doors, but most neighbors responded with silence and hesitation. Only one old man, Mr. Harris, seemed to know more. Wearing thick glasses, Mr. Harris said, "The Walter family was strange. They always kept to themselves. However, there were 3 people who worked there regularly, 2 women and 1 man." Jim listened carefully and asked, "Do you know what their jobs were?" Mr. Harris sighed. "As far as I know, the Walter family was mostly involved in business, selling food supplies to other factories. Beyond that, I don't know much." Jim, now more intrigued, pressed further. "Do you know the names of these 3 people?" The old man thought for a moment before replying, "Yes, the 2 women were named Lily Carmen and Emma Lewis, and the man was Oliver Brown." Jim was pleased with this information. These names were important. Now he could begin a deeper investigation, but there were still unanswered questions. "Mr. Harris, do you know where these 3 people live?" The old man shook his head regretfully. "Unfortunately, no. They lived in the Walter house as long as the family was alive." Jim thanked Mr. Harris and headed toward his car. Back at his office, he entered the names and details into his computer. The information alone wasn't enough, but he felt he had taken the right first step. The Walter family's case was more complex than it first appeared. Jim Gordon sat at his desk, analyzing the search results on his computer. After entering the names Lily Carmen, Emma Lewis, and Oliver Brown, he was met with a long list of individuals with the same names. Finding the right people wouldn't be easy, but Jim never backed down from a challenge. He refined the search by filtering results to the area where the Walter house was located. This time, the results were more precise. After reviewing the data, Jim finally found their faces and addresses. The first person he decided to visit was Lily Carmen. Lily lived in a small, old house, very different from the grand Walter mansion. The walls were worn, and the yard was unkempt. Jim stepped out of his car and approached the wooden door, its paint peeling from age. He rang the doorbell. After a few moments, the door opened, revealing an elderly woman with a tired face and worried eyes. She stared at Jim and spoke softly. "Yes, who are you?" Jim showed his badge and politely asked, "Hello, I'm Detective Jim Gordone. May I speak with your daughter, Lily Carmen?" The old woman gave Jim a suspicious look. She hesitated as if debating whether to say something, then turned back into the house and called for her daughter. Moments later, Lily Carmen appeared in the doorway, a young woman with light brown hair and an average height, dressed in simple clothes. When she saw Jim, she seemed startled but tried to remain calm. "Hello, how can I help you?" she asked in a quiet voice, though her expression showed a hint of concern. Jim studied her face carefully before getting straight to the point. "I'd like to ask you a few questions about the murder of the Walter family." For a brief moment, the color drained from Lily's face. She shot a quick glance at her mother, who was silently watching Jim. Taking a deep breath, she replied, "Of course. Ask away." Interrogating Lily Carmen, Jim started with a simple question. "How long did you work for the Walter family?" Lily thought for a moment before answering. "About 4 years." Jim nodded and immediately asked, "In those 4 years, did you ever notice anything unusual about the Walter family? Any threats, enemies, or people who disliked them?" Lily quickly shook her head. "No, nothing unusual. They were always focused on their business. They weren't mysterious people." Jim sensed no hesitation in her answers, but there was a slight nervousness in her behavior. "What do you know about the other house staff?" Jim asked, carefully watching her reaction. Lily hesitated before saying, "I was close with Emma. She was kind and full of energy, but she didn't like Mrs. Walter." Jim raised an eyebrow. "Why? What was wrong with Mrs. Walter?" Lily shrugged. "Emma thought she was cold and heartless. She believed Mrs. Walter didn't care about the staff, only about herself and her luxurious life." Jim made a mental note of this. Emma Lewis had disliked Mrs. Walter. This could be important. Now he needed to ask about the man who had caught his attention. "What can you tell me about Oliver Brown?"